Before we dive into some of the policy implications, I just want to take a moment to really emphasize just President Joe Biden has been a career politician for 40 years and counting, spending so much of his time on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And before we dive into kind of the international implications further, I want to get your take on whether this signifies a more drastic turn away from a candidate who is a career politician. We've seen this in other parts of the world. The UK, for example, being a career politician isn't always a good thing. President Trump certainly isn't one either. Tina, is this the start of the end of career politicians?
No, it's not the start of the end of career politicians. And Kamala Harris has been in government for a long time. And of course, she's been the vice president sitting in the White House. So that wouldn't be how I characterize this. And I want to suggest that we resist the tendency to overthink what's just happened in this race. Basically, American voters have been offered an alternative to Trump, and Harris's task is really about mobilizing those never-Trumpers and various other sort of constituencies to form a new coalition. So I would not suggest that we apply the same lens to this race when the playbook has just been torn up.
Can she do that, though? Can she not only unify the party, but unify the country, especially when Ollie, for example, was diving into some of the details around foreign policy? One of her criticisms is that she doesn't really have a very strong foreign policy record. What would you say to that? How does she fight that allegation?
Well, first of all, I mean, the people that I advise most closely are international investors and the global C-suite who are looking for the chances that Trump doesn't win, right? Especially when it comes to European security, Asian security, the U.S. security umbrella. So the assumption should be that a President Harris would maintain that broad continuity and commitment to U.S. participation in global institutions. The detail of her foreign policy is not going to be what makes or breaks her chances in winning this election.
And good morning, Tina. Lizzy here. Our last guest, Thomas Gift from UCL, made the point that Joe Biden now is a lame duck. That's pretty obvious. But I wonder whether it's responsible for him to stay as current president if, by his own judgment, he isn't up to being the next president.
I mean, this is punditry, right? Biden is going to go down in history as a one-term president. That's not a short list that any U.S. president wants to be on. He'll want to finish out his race now, the presidential race. There's an opportunity, you know, a short one at that, to change the guard in the Democratic Party.
And so what can he hope to achieve in these last few months in the White House?
Well, given the new decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court, if he wanted to, he could ram through all kinds of things. It remains to be seen whether he'll take the opportunity to do that. But remember that the executive branch of the U.S. government has just been massively strengthened by the U.S. Supreme Court. I really think the focus will be between now and January, because remember that Biden will stay on through January, in maintaining party unity and in really showcasing what Harris can do. But most of all, Harris should be judged on her ability to unify this coalition. That's why the vice presidential nominee will matter more, in my view, than it usually does. And what I would say to your viewers is, instead of thinking, can a Black woman actually be elected as the U.S. president, in contrast to, well, the U.S. has never voted for a female president, let alone a Black one, but whether the country wants to have a second term of Donald Trump or not. And that's where perhaps there are some commonalities with what we've just seen in the UK. Keir Starmer didn't set the world on fire with his charisma, but the opposition to the incumbent Conservative Party ruling for 14 years was enough to put the Labour Party in office.